The year was 1872, and the Arizona Territory was a land caught between promise and peril. Vast stretches of red earth rolled beneath a burning sky, where the wind carried the scent of dust, mesquite, and the ghosts of countless battles. It was a place where soldiers and settlers dreamed of conquest, and where the Apache still rode, proud, unbroken, and unwilling to yield. Amid this harsh frontier, Evelyn Carter lived a life that was both privileged and confined. At 22, she was the daughter of Colonel Henry Carter, a stern but respected officer who had spent most of his military life pushing westward with the U.S. Army. Their home stood at the edge of Fort Lowell, a lonely outpost surrounded by scrubland and the ever-present whisper of drums from distant mesas. Evelyn was everything her father had hoped she'd become: educated, composed, and dutiful. Yet behind her calm blue eyes lay a restlessness she could never quite name. She had grown up hearing the clash of bugles and the crack of rifles, but also the songs of the land at night, the cry of coyotes, and the ancient silence between canyon walls. Something in that silence called to her, though she didn't yet know why. Her mother had died years earlier of fever, and since then Evelyn had become the colonel's pride and responsibility. He loved her in his own rigid way, seeing in her not only a daughter but a symbol of everything he'd sacrificed for: honor, order, and the promise of a civilized West. To secure her future, he arranged a marriage that would cement her place among the military elite. The man chosen for her was General Nathaniel Briggs, a decorated officer in his 40s, celebrated for his victories in the Indian campaigns. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and impeccably mannered, the kind of man who inspired both admiration and fear. To most he was a hero. To Evelyn, he was an enigma wrapped in cold steel. When the general visited the fort that spring, he arrived with ceremony. Banners snapping in the wind, boots gleaming, medals glinting in the desert sun. The men saluted him. The women whispered his name. Evelyn watched from the veranda as he dismounted, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon before resting on her. His smile was thin, a gesture of possession rather than warmth. At dinner that night, Briggs spoke of duty, destiny, and progress. He praised her father's service and referred to Evelyn as a fine example of American virtue. When he lifted his glass and said, "To our future, Miss Carter," she smiled politely, though inside her heart felt heavy, as if bound by unseen chains. Later, when the men smoked cigars and discussed troop movements, Evelyn stood outside beneath the stars. The desert stretched endless and wild before her, beautiful, untamed, and utterly indifferent to human ambition. She wondered what it would mean to marry a man who saw the world as territory to be conquered. Her father joined her a moment later, his expression softening. "You'll have a good life with him, Evie," he said quietly. "Security, respect, a home in Washington. You've spent enough years in the dust." Evelyn nodded, unwilling to disappoint him. "Yes, father." But as she looked out toward the shadowed mountains, a flicker of doubt stirred in her chest. The wind carried a distant sound, a faint rhythm like the beating of drums or perhaps the echo of hooves. It sent a shiver through her, not of fear but of something unexplainable. A sense that her fate, so neatly arranged, might not belong entirely to her. That night, Evelyn sat by lamplight and opened her journal. She wrote of the stars, of the desert, and of a strange longing she could not name. She ended the page with a single line: "I am promised to a general, but what does my heart promise?" Outside, the moon rose over the mesa, silvering the land. In the distance, unseen beyond the fort's walls, an Apache warrior rode silently through the night, his path destined to cross hers sooner than she could ever imagine. The weeks after General Briggs's visit passed beneath a sky of relentless blue. Fort Lowell pulsed with new energy. Soldiers drilling from dawn to dusk, supply wagons arriving in clouds of dust, and scouts riding out with orders sealed in wax. The expansion campaign had begun. The U.S. Army intended to pacify the nearby Apache bands once and for all. Evelyn Carter watched the bustle with a quiet unease. She saw pride in her father's eyes, ambition in the generals, and obedience in the faces of the young soldiers who saluted as they marched. Yet beneath all that discipline, she sensed something darker, a tension that hummed through the camp like a taut wire ready to snap. The Apache, she had been told, were ruthless. Thieves, raiders, Savages. That was the language the officers used when they spoke of them. But Evelyn had also seen their families from a distance. Women wrapped in bright shawls, children running barefoot near the foothills, men on horseback who moved like part of the wind. They did not look savage to her. They looked proud and desperate to remain free. Sometimes at twilight she climbed the low hill behind the fort and gazed toward the distant mesas where their fires burned faintly in the dusk. From up there she could almost believe the world was wide enough for both peoples. But not everyone shared her vision. One evening, as the soldiers gathered for supper, she overheard General Briggs speaking in the mess tent. His voice carried easily, deep, commanding, absolute. "The only way to end this," he said, "is to break them completely. They understand only power. Once their warriors are gone, the rest will fall in line." The men nodded in grim agreement. Evelyn felt a chill crawl up her spine. She turned away, unable to finish her meal. Later, her father found her by the stables, stroking her mare's neck to steady her hands. "Evelyn," he began gently, "you shouldn't listen to war talk. Briggs knows what he's doing. These tribes have been raiding settlers for months." "But father," she said softly, "aren't they fighting for their homes? For what was theirs before we arrived?" Her father's brow furrowed, his voice growing hard. "Don't speak like that. You sound like one of those Eastern journalists who've never faced an ambush. We bring order, protection, civilization." "Civilization," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "And at what cost?" He looked at her then, not as his daughter, but as a young woman he feared might be questioning everything he'd built his life upon. "You will marry General Briggs," he said finally. "It's decided. You'll understand in time." She said nothing, but inside something began to fracture. A small, silent rebellion of the heart. That night, as the wind howled through the fort, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She sat by her window watching the desert shimmer under a silver moon. Far away, a column of smoke rose near the mountains, too large to be a campfire. Her pulse quickened. The next morning, riders returned with grim news. Another settlement had been attacked. Several soldiers were dead. The Apache had struck back. The general ordered immediate retaliation. By noon, the air was thick with tension. Horses snorted, rifles were loaded, and dust clouds rose from the departing cavalry. Evelyn stood on the fort's wall and watched them disappear into the horizon. Her heart ached with a strange, helpless sorrow. For the soldiers, for the tribes, for a land that seemed to devour all who tried to possess it. When the last echoes of hoofbeats faded, she felt utterly alone. The war was no longer just something happening beyond the walls. It was closing in around her, shaping her fate with every decision made by men who saw her world in black and white. But in the wild expanse beyond the fort, beyond the reach of her father and the general, another kind of world existed. One that followed the rhythm of wind and fire, where freedom still breathed. And somewhere in that wilderness, the man who would one day change everything for her was watching the same sky, his heart already stirring toward destiny. 3 days after the soldiers rode out, Evelyn Carter received word that her father wanted her to travel east, away from the rising tension near the frontier. A wagon train would escort her to Fort Bowie, where she could await her father's return under safer conditions. It was a sensible plan, and yet as she packed her few belongings, she couldn't shake the feeling that the land itself was holding its breath. The morning she departed was golden and silent. The desert shimmered beneath the sun, the air already hot enough to blur the distant hills. Evelyn sat in a covered wagon beside Sergeant Mills, a kind-hearted veteran assigned to protect her. Behind them rode 6 cavalrymen, enough, they thought, to discourage trouble. As they rattled along the dusty trail, Evelyn looked out over the endless stretch of cactus and sage. The land seemed eternal, ancient in a way that humbled her. "It's beautiful," she murmured. Sergeant Mills smiled wearily. "Aye, ma'am. Beautiful and cruel. Don't let it fool you." By midday, they reached a narrow pass hemmed in by cliffs. The mules strained against the incline, and the soldiers' eyes swept the ridges with quiet caution. Even the wind seemed to hush. Then came a sound, faint at first like a low hum. A flicker of movement above the rocks, a shout, and then chaos. Arrows whistled from the ridges, striking the lead wagon. Horses screamed. The soldiers scrambled for cover, rifles flashing in the sun. Evelyn's heart pounded as she clutched the side of the wagon, too stunned to move. "Down, Miss Carter. Down!" Mills shouted, pulling her beneath the seat just as another volley rained down. Splinters flew. Dust filled her lungs. Through the blur of sound, she caught glimpses of men, Apache warriors, swift and fierce, their hair streaming behind them, their cries echoing like thunder. They moved with terrifying precision as if the land itself fought beside them. One soldier tried to flee on horseback. An arrow caught him before he'd gone 10 yards. Another fell beside the wagon, his blood darkening the sand. Evelyn pressed her hand to her mouth to stifle a cry. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the attack stopped. The air hung heavy with silence. The survivors, if there were any, lay still. The only sound was the creak of the wagon wheel turning lazily in the wind. A shadow fell across her. She looked up and met the eyes of a man unlike any she had ever seen. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his skin bronzed by sun and wind. His hair was dark and braided with small strips of leather, his chest bare beneath a bandolier of shells and beads. But it was his eyes that held her, sharp, black, and alive with something that was not hatred but command. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Evelyn's breath caught. The man spoke a few low words in Apache to the others who had gathered behind him. They hesitated, then began to search the wagons, gathering rifles, supplies, water. Evelyn waited for the end, for the blow, the pull, the fear she had been told to expect. But instead, the warrior crouched before her. He said something she didn't understand, his voice low, almost gentle. When she didn't respond, he switched to halting English. "You hurt?" She blinked, unable to speak. He gestured again, not a threat but an offer. His hand extended toward her, palm open. Slowly, trembling, Evelyn reached out. Her fingers touched his, warm, rough, human. That single contact seemed to split the world in two. Behind him, the cliffs glowed red in the setting sun. The dead lay still in the dust. And between those two realities, and war and mercy, Evelyn Carter felt her old life slipping away. The warrior straightened and gave a short command. 2 others lifted her gently from the wrecked wagon. As they led her away, she looked back once toward the road that vanished into the east. She did not yet know his name. She did not yet know that this moment, this ambush, would be the beginning of something that defied every promise, every border, every rule she had ever known. But somewhere deep inside, she felt it. Her story had just begun. Evelyn Carter awoke to the smell of smoke and the low murmur of voices. Her head throbbed, her body ached, and when she tried to sit up, rough hands steadied her. For one disoriented moment, she thought she was still in the wrecked wagon. Then the truth hit her. The ambush, the screams, the man with the dark eyes. Now she was in what looked like a circular Apache camp ringed by hide tents and low fires. Beyond the camp's edge stretched the vast wild desert painted gold by dawn. The light hurt her eyes, but it was beautiful. More beautiful than she dared admit. A woman approached, her hair long and silver-threaded, her face lined but kind. She offered Evelyn a gourd of water. Evelyn hesitated, then took it. The water was cool, sweet, and startlingly real. The older woman said something in Apache, a gentle stream of syllables Evelyn couldn't follow, and smiled faintly before walking away. Evelyn's heart pounded. She was alive, that much was certain. But for how long? Moments later he appeared, the warrior who had spared her. He approached slowly, as if not to frighten her. Up close he was even more striking. Every movement deliberate, his expression unreadable but not cruel. The others watched him with quiet respect, giving him space. Whoever he was, he commanded authority here. He spoke first in Apache, then, seeing her confusion, switched to English. "You, not soldier?" Evelyn swallowed hard. "No," she managed. "I'm not." He nodded, studying her face. "You are?" "Daughter of White Chief." "Yes," she said cautiously. "Colonel Carter." "I was being taken to Fort Bowie." His eyes flickered, a shadow passing through them. "Many soldiers kill our people," he said quietly. "My brother." "My mother." Evelyn lowered her gaze. "I'm sorry." The air between them seemed to still. Her voice trembled, not from fear but from something else she couldn't yet name. The warrior studied her for a long moment, then said, "No more fight today." He gestured to the horizon. "You safe, safe." The word struck her strangely. Was she really? When he turned to leave, she called out, "Wait, your name?" What is it? He looked back. Taza, the name lingered in the air after he was gone, like the echo of a drumbeat. The days that followed blurred together, long hours beneath the desert sun, nights cooled by firelight and strange melodic chants. Evelyn remained within the camp, watched but not mistreated. She helped grind corn with the women, fetched water, and tried to understand the rhythm of their lives. Taza came and went often, always with purpose. Sometimes she saw him ride out at dawn with other warriors, returning at dusk with dust in his hair and a quiet, haunted look in his eyes. The others deferred to him, not out of fear, but respect. One evening, as the sun bled red across the sky, Evelyn saw him alone by the river's edge, washing his hands in silence. She hesitated, then approached. "I don't understand," she said softly. "Why didn't you kill me?" Taza looked up, meeting her gaze. The firelight danced in his eyes, deep and sharp as obsidian. "Not all white eyes same," he said slowly. "You'd looked afraid, but not with hate. I see truth in eyes." Evelyn felt her breath catch. "And what truth did you see?" He studied her, his jaw tightening slightly. "You see what your people do. You don't like it." Her throat tightened. "No," she whispered. "I don't." For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, two people from worlds that should never have met, bound by something neither could name. The river whispered beside them, the first stars kindling above. Then Taza rose, his voice quiet but firm. "You are not my prisoner, white woman. But you cannot go, not yet. Too dangerous." She wanted to protest, but the words died in her throat. Somehow she believed him. As he turned to leave, she called softly, "Taza." He paused. "Thank you," she said. For the first time, he smiled, a fleeting, almost secret expression that reached his eyes before fading like the last light of day. That night, Evelyn lay awake under a sky thick with stars. The desert was silent, alive, eternal. And somewhere nearby, the man who had spared her life watched the same sky, wondering, perhaps for the first time, about the woman who had made him question the meaning of war. The days stretched into weeks. The Apache camp, once a place of fear, became a world of rhythm and quiet resilience. Evelyn Carter began to see things she had never been allowed to see before. Not as a colonel's daughter, not as a soldier's bride-to-be, but as a woman whose eyes were finally open. The people who surrounded her were not the savages she had been taught to fear. They were mothers and fathers, children and warriors, living close to the earth, bound by its pulse. Every morning they greeted the sun with open palms. Every evening they sang to the stars. Their world was one of scarcity and grace, danger and beauty, and Evelyn found herself both humbled and changed by it. She learned to grind corn into meal, to weave rough cloth, to carry water from the river without spilling a drop. The women who had first watched her with suspicion began to smile at her attempts, correcting her gently, laughing when she failed, cheering softly when she succeeded. One evening, the elder woman who had first brought her water pressed a small beaded charm into her hand, a symbol of protection. Evelyn didn't know the words to thank her properly, but the woman seemed to understand the gratitude in her eyes. Taza watched all of this from a distance. He was often gone, leading scouting parties, negotiating with other Apache bands, or hunting in the high mesas. But whenever he returned, Evelyn felt it before she saw him. The camp seemed to breathe easier. The children ran to meet him. The warrior's shoulders straightened, and she, though she told herself not to, felt a quiet thrill of relief each time he came back unharmed. One afternoon, while the camp rested beneath the shade of cottonwoods, Evelyn saw Taza sharpening his knife near the fire. Summoning her courage, she approached. "You're always leaving," she said softly, "always risking yourself." Taza glanced up. "My people fight for life, for land, for freedom. You understand this?" "I think I do," she said. "But I also know fighting never ends. It only moves from one side to the other." He studied her face for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You are between two fires." The phrase hung in the air. "What do you mean?" she asked. He touched his chest. "Your heart. Half belongs to your people, half—" He hesitated, searching for the right word. "Sees truth." Evelyn looked away, the words cutting too close to what she felt. "And you? Are you not between fires too? Between peace and war?" His jaw tightened. "War chose us. Not we." They fell silent. The only sound was the wind moving through the trees, whispering in a language older than both their worlds. Later that night, the camp gathered for a ceremony, a ritual Evelyn didn't fully understand. The drums were slow and deep, the air thick with the scent of sage and firewood. Taza stood near the flames, his face lit in gold and shadow. He moved with a quiet authority that drew every eye, his voice joining the low chant in words Evelyn couldn't translate, but somehow felt in her bones. Watching him, she realized something had shifted inside her. This man, this enemy, thus, had shown her more humanity in weeks than the men of her own world had in years. He had treated her not as property, not as a symbol of conquest, but as a person. When the ceremony ended, Taza approached her. He handed her a piece of carved wood, a small eagle with wings outstretched. "For you," he said. "Eagle sees all, flies between earth and sky." She turned it in her hands, feeling the smoothness of the carving, the warmth where his fingers had touched it. "It's beautiful," she whispered. He nodded once, his gaze steady. "You see both worlds now. You must choose which one to fly in." That night, long after the fires had burned low, Evelyn lay awake beneath a blanket of stars. The air was cool, the night alive with distant calls of coyotes. She turned the eagle over in her hands and felt the weight of his words. She was between two fires indeed, one born of duty and expectation, the other of truth and awakening, and somewhere between them, her heart had begun to burn with its own flame. The days grew softer, though danger still lingered in the distance like a shadow that refused to fade. The soldiers were pushing deeper into Apache territory, and the air was thick with rumors of battles and burned villages. Yet in the small valley where Taza's band had hidden, life persisted, fragile, quiet, stubbornly beautiful. Evelyn Carter's hands had grown stronger. Her skin, once pale and delicate, was now kissed by the sun. The women no longer called her outsider, but used a gentler name, Nana, meaning sister. She smiled when she heard it. She belonged nowhere and everywhere all at once, but it was Taza who unsettled her most. He came and went like the wind, never explaining where he'd been, never saying much at all. Yet his presence filled the camp even when he was silent. Evelyn could feel him near her before she saw him, could sense the steady gravity that seemed to hold everything together. One afternoon, while she gathered wild herbs near the river, she found him kneeling by the water, carving something from a piece of driftwood. She hesitated before stepping closer. "What are you making?" she asked. Taza didn't look up. "Words," he said. She frowned, unsure if she'd heard correctly. "Words?" He held up the carving, the curved lines forming a symbol she didn't recognize. "Apache word for river. You carve your words?" she said, smiling. He shrugged. "We do not write as you do. We remember, we speak. The land carries our words." She knelt beside him. "Then teach me," she said. That was how it began. Each evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, Taza taught her his language, soft syllables carried by wind and patience. She learned slowly, fumbling the sounds, laughing when she failed, blushing when he corrected her. And in return, she taught him English. They sat by the fire with small sticks, drawing letters in the dust. "This," she said, tracing an E. "It's the start of my name, Evelyn." He repeated the sound carefully, his deep voice lingering on the syllables. "Ever-Lyn," she smiled. "Very good." He leaned closer, eyes flickering with warmth. "Your name? Sound like song." Her heart fluttered in a way she didn't understand. In those twilight hours they shared stories, broken, halting, and yet perfectly clear. Taza told her of his childhood, of his father teaching him to hunt and his mother singing him to sleep by the fire. Evelyn told him of Boston winters, of music, of a mother's laughter now long gone. Sometimes they said nothing at all. The silence between them spoke its own language, a rhythm of glances, breaths, and small gestures that carried more meaning than words ever could. One night, a storm swept across the desert. Wind howled through the valley and lightning cracked the sky in white veins. The Apache huddled in their shelters. Evelyn's tent shuddered under the weight of rain. She was alone and frightened when Taza entered, his face lit by flashes of light. "You are safe," he said, crouching beside her. She nodded, but her voice trembled. "It sounds so close," he smiled faintly. "The storm speaks, but it will not hurt you." They sat together as thunder rolled overhead, shaking the earth. For a moment, Evelyn thought she saw the world not as chaos, but as something alive, fierce, wild, untamed. Just like the man beside her. When she looked at him, he was watching her too, not with hunger but with a kind of awe, as if he were seeing something sacred. Neither of them spoke. Words would have ruined the stillness. When the storm passed, the world was clean again, the desert shining with raindrops like glass. Evelyn stepped outside, feeling the cool earth beneath her feet. Taza stood behind her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. Without thinking, she turned to him. Their eyes met, and for one fragile heartbeat, the space between them dissolved. No war, no promises, no past. Just the quiet understanding of two souls who had learned to speak the same silent language. Taza reached out and brushed a strand of wet hair from her face. His touch was light, reverent. "Now you speak like Apache," he murmured. No words, only truth. And as the dawn broke over the valley, Evelyn knew that something irreversible had happened, not in the world around her, but within her heart. The peace in the valley could never last. Evelyn had begun to sense it before anyone spoke. In the way the warriors' eyes grew wary when they returned from scouting, in the way the women whispered while grinding corn, in the restless way Taza stood at the ridge each dusk, scanning the horizon. War was coming closer. Word spread through the camp like smoke. Soldiers had been seen near the southern canyon. Fort Lowell had received reinforcements. The name General Nathaniel Briggs was spoken with dread, even among the Apache who did not know English. Evelyn froze the first time she heard it. Briggs, the man she was promised to. The man who believed her dead, or worse, dishonored. One evening, Taza returned from a long ride, his horse lathered with sweat. His jaw was tight, his face set in grim focus. Evelyn met him as he dismounted. "What is it?" she asked, breathless. He looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Soldiers come, many, they burn camps. Kill the weak. They look for you." Her stomach dropped. "For me?" He nodded. "General think Apache steal white woman. He wants war." Evelyn turned away, her hands trembling. "Then he'll bring it. He always wanted a reason." Taza's gaze softened. "You do not belong to him." His words struck her like an arrow. Simple, absolute, true. "No," she said quietly. "I don't." That night the Apache Council met. Evelyn sat apart, listening to the low hum of voices and the crackle of the fire. Taza spoke firmly, his tone calm but urgent. He wanted to move the people north toward the mountains, away from the soldiers. But others argued they should stay and fight. When the council broke, Taza came to her, his expression unreadable. "You should go with the women," he said. "If soldiers come, I will fight." "I won't leave," Evelyn said. "Not if it means your death." He shook his head. "This is not your war." Her voice trembled. "It became mine the moment they attacked that wagon." Taza's dark eyes held hers, steady, searching. "If you stay, you may die." "Then I'll die beside truth," she whispered. He said nothing more. But in the quiet that followed, something unspoken passed between them, something deeper than defiance, stronger than fear. 2 days later, the first smoke appeared on the horizon. The army was close. The Apache packed quickly, children clutching blankets, warriors mounting their horses. Evelyn helped load supplies, her heart pounding. As the sun dipped low, Taza rode out with a small band of scouts to delay the soldiers. Evelyn watched him go, the eagle carving still warm in her palm. Every instinct told her to run, to hide, to pray, but she couldn't move. By nightfall, the sky glowed orange from distant fires. The smell of gunpowder carried on the wind. The sound of rifles echoed faintly through the canyons. When Taza finally returned, his arm was bloodied, his face streaked with dust. Evelyn ran to him. "You're hurt!" she cried, reaching for him. He caught her wrist gently. "No time," he said. "They come faster than we thought." She looked toward the burning horizon, then back at him. "Taza, please, there must be another way." He met her gaze, his voice low and steady. "I fight because I must. You, because you care." The words stole her breath. When he turned to join the other warriors, she caught his hand. "Promise me you'll come back," she whispered. For a moment, the hardened warrior softened. He leaned closer, his forehead resting against hers, a gesture that spoke more than any vow could. "If the wind still blows," he murmured, "I will return." And then he was gone, swallowed by the darkness. riding toward the storm that would decide both their fates. Evelyn stood alone at the edge of the valley, the wind lifting her hair, carrying the scent of smoke and loss. Behind her, the women prayed in low, trembling voices. Ahead, the world was on fire, and somewhere beyond that fire, two men, one bound by duty, one by love, were riding toward each other and toward her. The valley was no longer quiet. Smoke curled into the sky from distant fires, the air thick with the acrid scent of gunpowder and fear. The Apache camp had moved to the high mesas, but the army was relentless. Evelyn Carter watched from the ridge as soldiers fanned out below, their uniforms bright against the dark earth. Among them, she knew, was General Nathaniel Briggs. Her chest tightened. This was the man she had been promised, the man whose life had once seemed inevitable, and now he marched against everything she had come to love. Taza stood beside her, his eyes scanning the horizon with a predator's focus. His jaw was tight, muscles coiled like springs. He had ridden through ambushes, survived gunfire, and returned time and again for this moment. Evelyn had never seen him so tense. "They are too many," she whispered. Taza shook his head. "Numbers mean little. We know the land. We know the wind. They do not," her heart pounded. "And if they reach the camp?" He turned, his gaze softening just for her. "Then you warn them." "I cannot leave you behind." Evelyn swallowed hard. Fear, anger, and something far deeper churned within her. She realized that she was no longer the colonel's daughter, no longer a pawn in someone else's plan. She was a part of this world now, and part of Taza's life. The attack came at dawn. The army moved like a tide, rifles gleaming, bayonets catching the first rays of sunlight. Apache warriors scattered across the ridges, arrows flying, rifles cracking, horses screaming. Evelyn crouched behind a boulder, clutching a small pouch of food and water, her pulse hammering. Suddenly she saw him. General Briggs, mounted, spurs flashing, scanning the ridges with cold eyes. He spotted her, and for a moment time seemed to freeze. Evelyn's breath caught. She had thought she had left him behind, but he had come, relentless as always. Taza moved like lightning, riding toward the army with a small group of warriors to draw their fire. The sound of rifles and screams filled the air. Evelyn wanted to call out, to run, to stop the violence. Yet she could do nothing but watch as the two worlds she belonged to collided. Then she saw it, a soldier about to strike Taza from behind. Without thinking, she ran, her voice ringing out. "Taza!" He turned just in time, spinning to parry the attack. Their eyes met, hers wide with fear, his fierce and unflinching. The moment was electric, charged with terror, love, and desperation all at once. Evelyn realized she could not remain passive. She ran along the edge of the battlefield, warning women and children hidden in small ravines. She shouted, gestured, risked herself again and again. Every step, every movement was a defiance of the world she had once known. Taza fought with unmatched skill, his every move precise, his mind calm despite the chaos. He returned briefly to her side, grabbing her hand, his grip strong and reassuring. "Stay close," he commanded, and she did, even as bullets whistled past, dust and blood mingling in the heat of battle. Somewhere behind them, General Briggs watched, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. Evelyn realized then that this confrontation was more than a battle. It was a collision of duty and love, of power and freedom, of the past and the future. By midday, the tide began to turn. Taza's knowledge of the terrain, his warrior's courage, and Evelyn's warnings had saved many lives. But the cost was already written in blood and fire. She clutched the eagle carving in her hand, the small token of their bond, and whispered, "We survive. Because we fight together." Taza glanced at her. Sweat and dirt streaked across his face, his chest heaving. His eyes softened, and for a fleeting second, the battlefield, chaos, death, war, and faded. There was only her. There was only them. Love, she realized, had never been safer or more dangerous than standing between two fires. The sun had barely risen when the soldiers struck again. Smoke from distant fires hung in the valley like a living thing, curling over the ridges, masking movement. Evelyn Carter crouched behind a boulder, her hands gripping the eagle carving Taza had given her. The warmth of it reminded her of his presence, even when he was far away. Taza was already in the fray, moving like a shadow across the ridges. He fought with a precision and strength that seemed superhuman, his dark eyes scanning every approach, every danger. Evelyn watched him, her heart caught between awe and terror. Then she saw it. A group of soldiers had broken through the line, riding straight for the spot where she had been warning the women and children to hide. Her voice caught in her throat as she ran forward to intercept them. But before she could act, Taza was there. He threw himself between the attackers and her, steel meeting rifle fire. Bullets tore the air around him. One found its mark, striking his side. He stumbled but did not fall. Evelyn gasped, her hands pressing to his wound in a frantic attempt to stem the bleeding, but she could do nothing. "Taza," she cried. "Hold on!" He looked down at her, his dark eyes calm and fierce at once. "You must live," he said, his voice strained but unwavering. "Go, warn them. Protect them, no." "I won't leave you," she shouted, tears streaking her dirt-smudged face. He shook his head, forcing a weak smile. "Your heart, stronger than mine. Now." With that, he pushed her toward the ravine where the children and women crouched, shielding her from view. The soldiers' shouts echoed closer, their rifles aimed, but Taza did not flinch. He faced them alone, a single figure against an advancing tide. Evelyn hid, her body pressed into the earth, her hands gripping the carving, whispering his name over and over like a prayer. From her vantage point, she saw him move with grace and fury, deflecting, dodging, striking, buying time for the innocents to escape. Every swing of his weapon, every precise shot of his rifle was a dance of survival and defiance. Then came the final charge. A mounted officer, rifle leveled, aimed directly at Taza. Evelyn froze, her breath caught in her throat. She felt the world tilt, the air shrink, the sun blur. A shot rang out, closer than she wanted to hear. Taza's body jolted, and he fell to one knee, then to the ground. The rider screamed, the horse rearing, chaos exploding around her. Evelyn's stomach lurched. She could not move, could not cry, could not even blink. Taza lay there, his chest heaving, one hand pressed to the wound. His dark eyes found hers across the distance, and for a heartbeat the world fell silent. No bullets, no smoke, no fire, just the two of them, bound by something deeper than fear, deeper than survival. "You must," he whispered, struggling to speak. "Live, see, truth. Remember me." Evelyn shook her head, tears spilling freely. "No, don't leave me. Please." He managed a small pained smile. "I will, always, with you." The soldiers pressed closer, and Taza knew his time was short. With a final surge of strength, he rolled to shield a group of fleeing women and children, deflecting another volley of bullets. The eagle carving slipped from Evelyn's pocket into her hands, a symbol of the bond they had forged, of the freedom and courage he had shown her. Then he fell still. Evelyn screamed, running to him as the soldiers were driven back by the remaining warriors. She cradled his head in her lap, feeling the heat of his body fade. His eyes fluttered once, then closed, a faint smile lingering on his lips. "You are brave," he whispered, voice fading like wind over the mesas. She held him, rocking him gently, tears soaking into the dust and blood, feeling the unbearable weight of loss and the fierce love that had grown between them. Even as the soldiers retreated, even as the camp began to regain some semblance of safety, Evelyn knew that nothing would ever be the same. Taza had given everything, his life, his strength, his spirit, so that she, and the people of the land he loved, could live. And in that sacrifice, she understood something essential: love, courage, and freedom were worth every cost, even if the cost was more than one heart could bear. She pressed the eagle carving to her chest and whispered into the wind, "I will remember you, Taza, always." The war had ended, at least for the moment, but the land was forever changed. Smoke still lingered in the valleys. Scorched earth bore witness to battles, and survivors carried the weight of what had been lost. Evelyn Carter returned to the mesas where Taza had lived, but he did not. His absence was a hollow ache, a shadow that clung to her heart, reminding her of love, courage, and sacrifice. The Apache had moved north to rebuild, wary of the army's return but determined to survive. Evelyn stayed with them, accepted as Nana, a sister of the people, no longer a visitor or a hostage, but part of a world she had grown to love fiercely. She taught the children to read, wrote letters in the English she knew, and recorded stories of the land and the people who refused to yield. Each day, she would climb the ridges where Taza had once stood, tracing the paths he had ridden, imagining the strength in his dark eyes and the warmth of his rare smiles. She pressed the small eagle carving into her palm each morning, the one he had given her in the valley, and whispered a silent vow. I will live as you taught me. I will carry your truth. Time did not erase the memory of him. Nights were hardest when the desert seemed to echo with the sound of hooves, the rhythm of drums, and his calm, unwavering voice. She often dreamed of his eyes, and in those dreams she could still hear his words. You are not my prisoner. You are free. And she was free. Free to choose, free to live, free to honor him without compromise. In the quiet moments, Evelyn thought of General Nathaniel Briggs. He had returned to the East, his ambition intact but his triumph incomplete. She would never marry him. She no longer belonged to the world that had once promised her as property, as a means to cement ambition. That life had ended the moment she had met Taza. Her heart, once tethered by duty, now soared with memory and purpose. She walked through the camps, through the high mesas, through the fields where children laughed and warriors trained. Each face she passed reminded her that survival, courage, and love could coexist. Even in a world shaped by violence, one spring morning, as wildflowers bloomed along the canyon floor and the wind carried the scent of rain, Evelyn sat beneath a cottonwood and began to write. She wrote of Taza, of his sacrifice, of the lessons he had given her. She wrote of the land, the people, and the fragile, precious freedom that could not be conquered by armies or treaties. When she finished, she tied the papers together and placed the eagle carving on top. She whispered to the wind, letting it carry her words across the mesas. Taza, I will keep your promise. I will honor your life and mine. Years passed. Evelyn never married, though she was surrounded by the people she loved. She became a bridge between worlds, teaching, guiding, and remembering. Her hands bore the marks of work, her eyes the wisdom of hardship, and her heart the love of a man who had shown her what freedom truly meant. And though Taza was gone, he remained with her, in the wind that swept across the desert, in the flight of the eagles above the ridges, in the rhythm of the land itself. The woman once promised to a general had rewritten her own destiny. She had chosen not wealth, not security, not duty, but a life shaped by truth, courage, and love. On the edge of the mesa, Evelyn stood tall, the sun at her back, the vast desert stretching before her. She raised the eagle carving to the sky, letting it catch the light, and smiled. I was promised to a general, she whispered, but I gave my heart to the strongest warrior I ever knew, and I will never forget him. And as the wind carried her words into the endless Arizona sky, Evelyn felt finally that she had kept the greatest promise of all, the promise to herself.